Hi everyone, welcome to this video where we will learn about Amazon S3. Okay, so my name is Aishwarya Sood. I am a software engineer and AWS trainer, and I am 3x AWS certified, AWS certified developer associate, solutions architect associate, also AWS certified cloud practitioner, and I am also an AWS Academy accredited educator. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. My profile name is Aishwarya Sood29, and you can also scan this QR code to quickly view my profile. So in this video, we will first start by discussing what is the object storage, how is it different from other types of storage. Then we will have a little introduction to Amazon S3. We will see what are the concepts that come into it, then the storage classes, lifecycle policies, access control, use cases, versioning, demo. Okay, so all of these features in S3, I'll be giving you a brief overview of them. Also, I will give you different demos for different things that we will be discussing on S3. So let's begin with our session. First, before we begin discussing Amazon S3, let me tell you a little bit about object storage. So it's relatively different from the traditional storage system such as file or the block storage. So what is object storage exactly? It is basically storage for unstructured data that eliminates the scaling limitations for traditional file storage. And limitless scale is the reason that object storage is a storage for the cloud. Object storage delivers limitless scale because unlike the addressing hierarchy that is used with the traditional file storage, object storage employs a flat file system that has no built-in limits. So hence it's able to hold huge volumes of unstructured data such as audio, video, emails, and health records and documents. So there will be one critical difference between some storage types, whether they offer block level storage or object level storage. This difference has a major effect on the throughput, latency, and cost of your storage solution. Block storage solutions are typically faster and use less bandwidth, but they can cost more than the object level storage. So let's now see how we use the object storage on AWS. So here it is. We have Amazon S3, about which we will be learning a lot in today's session. So Amazon S3 is a object level storage, which means that if you want to change a part of a file, you must make the change and then re-upload the entire modified file. Okay, let's say I'm storing some file in Amazon S3. It contains some data. I want to modify that data. What I have to do in my local system, I will modify the file. Then I will upload the I will re-upload the modified file to Amazon S3. Okay, because this is a object storage, I can't make the change in the existing file there itself. It stores the data files are stored as objects. You place the objects in a component known as bucket, which you define. Every bucket must have the name that is globally unique across the regions. This means that the bucket name must be unique across all AWS customer accounts. For example, let's say you are creating a bucket in S3 and you are naming it as test bucket, but test bucket is a very common name. This would have been taken for sure by somebody else in the world. So that means you can't take that name. You will have to go for some other name. Maybe test bucket XYZ, maybe test bucket 1234 XYZ, something like that, which is unique all around the world. Nobody should have taken that name in the all the customer AWS accounts. Okay, so bucket is nothing but a kind of folder. Object is nothing but the actual file that you are storing in the bucket. Okay, it also provides good level of durability, which describes the average annual expected loss of objects. 11 nines of durability means that every year there is 0.000001% chance of losing an object. That is, quite huge. Okay, for example, if you store 10,000 objects on Amazon S3, you can expect to incur a loss of a single object once every 1 billion years on an average. That is quite huge. So that means your data will be always available when you want to access, and it won't be lost. You can store virtually as many objects as you want in the bucket, and you can write, read, and delete objects in your bucket. You can store any kind of data in your S3 bucket like images, audio files, video, text files, HTML files, etc. Okay. Now talking about the limits in S3. There are only a few limits in S3, such as the maximum size of a single S3 object can be 5 TB, and it's quite huge, right? Also, you can have 100 buckets per account, which is again a soft limit, which means you can get this limit increased up to 1000 buckets in case you need to create more buckets. There's no limit on the size of the bucket and the number of objects that you can store in a bucket. So you can see no much limits, okay, huge scalability and easy to use. This is what S3 is. Now coming to the redundancy that it gives. When you create a bucket in Amazon S3, it is associated with the specific AWS region. You will specify that region, and when you store data in the bucket, it is redundantly stored across multiple availability zones within your selected region. It is designed to durably store your data even if there's a concurrent data loss in 2 AZs, because it is keeping your data across 3 AZs within the same region, in the region that you have selected. Okay, it will keep your data across 3 AZs. So how should you decide the region in which you want to create the bucket that stores your data? You will select the region to store your data based on the proximity to the users, service and feature availability, and pricing. So let me give you an example for what does proximity to the users means. Let's say this is you are residing, this is a user, okay, let's say this is you are residing in India, and you have an application for whose the customers basically they are mostly in USA and Canada. Okay, so customers are basically residing in USA and Canada, but here are you are in India. So where should you keep your data? Is it that you should decide India as the region for your S3 bucket, or USA and Canada? Of course, you won't store the data here. Instead, you will store the data in a bucket that is residing in USA and in a bucket that is residing in Canada, because you have to select the region that is close to your users. Why? Because they will be able to access the data faster, because they will be accessing the data from a bucket that is residing near to you. Okay. It doesn't matter if you keep the bucket here, because the person who is going to access the data, he is residing in USA, he is residing in Canada. Then why to keep the bucket in India? No, you have to keep the region which is close to your customers. Okay, and next was the service and feature availability and the pricing. So it is also possible that all the services, all the features will not be available in all the regions. Okay, this is a possibility. Okay, so before you select a region, make sure the service or the feature that you want to use, is it available in that region. Okay, the next point was the pricing. So if you are like going to select a region, make sure you are comparing the prices also, because the pricing also vary by like minor changes from region to region. Make sure you are getting the perfect price in the region that you are selecting. So once all the decisions are made, like the region is close to your users, the service is also available, feature is also available, and the pricing is also perfect, you are good to go. Go ahead and select that region. So let's now discuss about the access, not the access patterns, but the storage classes first before moving to the access pattern. S3 offers a range of object level storage classes that are designed for different use cases and access patterns, like whether you want to access the data frequently, infrequently, or how long you want to keep the data as backups. So these classes includes, first is Amazon S3 Standard. This class is used if you have the data which you will be accessing frequently. Let's say you are storing something in S3 and you will be accessing that data maybe every hour or maybe every day. That kind of data can be kept in Amazon S3 Standard class. Next is S3 Intelligent Tiering. So about this I'll tell in a while. First let me tell about the another class, that is S3 Standard Infrequent Access. So if you have the data that you are going to store in S3 bucket, which you will be accessing like after maybe few days or maybe after few weeks, you can store that data in S3 standard infrequent access. Then coming to the intelligent tiering, what is this class? Maybe you are going to store some data in S3 bucket, but at the time of storing, you are not sure whether you will be accessing the data frequently or infrequently, whether you will be accessing it in few weeks or maybe after few hours. You are not sure about that. What you can do, you can go ahead and select the S3 intelligent tiering. What it will do, it will analyze the access patterns of your object. If you are accessing it frequently, it will move your objects to S3 standard. If you are accessing it infrequently, it will move your objects to the S3 standard infrequent access automatically. Okay, based on the access patterns. If frequent, it will go there. If infrequent, it will go there. Okay, why it is doing all of this? Why we are moving from class to class? In order to save the cost, because it is quite costly to store the data in S3 standard if we compare it to the costs of standard infrequent access. So all these storage classes have different pricing. Okay, next class is S3 one zone infrequent access. So if you remember on the previous slide, I have told you that if you store something in an S3 bucket in a region, it will replicate your data across 3 availability zones within a same region. So this class won't keep your object in 3 AZs. As the name suggests, what it will do, if you have the data that you are going to store in S3 bucket, but that data is like not very critical, you are okay if that's lost in case of an AZ failure. You can keep that in one zone infrequent access. So what will happen? It will keep your data only in one availability zone instead of replicating it across 3 AZs. It will keep there in one AZ only. So if that one AZ is lost, if that one AZ is like it has some problems, it has failed, then your data will also be lost. So if you are okay with that, if you have some kind of non-critical data, go ahead and select the one zone infrequent access class. Next is S3 Glacier. So if you have the data which you will be accessing after few months or maybe after an year, okay, so some kind of data which you just want to keep as the backups, just for the record purposes. You don't want the real time access. Okay, for those objects you can keep them in the S3 Glacier because it is specifically used for the backup purposes, for the data that is supposed to be kept as backup, which you won't be accessing daily, but maybe for the record purposes you want to keep, like the hospital records. When the patient has left the hospital, still the data should be kept, right? For some specified amount of time, the data should be kept as a record. So that kind of data that won't be accessed daily, but it should be kept there for the record purposes, that you can say for the archival or for the backup purposes, it will be kept in the S3 Glacier. Next comes a S3 Glacier Deep Archive. So if you have the data you want to store for even longer terms, maybe 7 to 10 years or maybe for 20 years, you can select the Glacier Deep Archive. Again, for the record purposes, for the backup purposes you want to keep, you do not want the real time access. This class will be useful in that case. The difference is that this Glacier Deep Archive is the cheapest of all the options that are available, even cheaper than the S3 Glacier. So now I hope you would have understood the differences between all the classes, and next time when you are going to store some data, you will have an idea which class is perfect for you. Next comes the access patterns. Here are three different approaches to configure the access to the objects in an S3 bucket. The first image shows the default security settings for Amazon S3. Remember that by default all the Amazon S3 buckets and the objects stored in them are private by default. The only entitles with the access to a newly created unmodified bucket are the account administrator and the AWS account root user. Okay, the one who has created the bucket. Okay, that person can access the bucket and the objects that are stored in it. Nobody else will be able to access that. Okay, you can see only the owner is able to access because they are private. Nobody else can access the bucket and the object. Next comes the the middle scenario that you can see here. This shows an occasion where S3 security settings have been disabled and anyone can publicly access the objects that are stored in the bucket. So I will show you these settings on the S3 console also, but just to make you understand, so what's happening here? Here nobody else was able to access, here everyone was able to access. Okay, you have made it entirely public. Here it was entirely private, here it is entirely public. The owner is able to access, as well as anybody who has the object URL, they also can access the object. Okay, next comes a controlled access. So this was like either entirely private or entirely public. But what if you have a case where you want that, okay, this user should access the objects, this user should not access the objects. In that case, you want to enable a controlled access. Okay, that some people should be able to access the objects that you define, but others should not be able to access it. Okay, you do not want to make it entirely private, you do not want to make it entirely public, but you want a controlled access. In that case, you have multiple things that you can use, like bucket policies, access control lists, that can help you define a controlled access as per your requirements. So this is how the access patterns are divided into different categories. And now we will see that how do we set this up on the AWS console. So let's go to the AWS console and see how do we create the S3 buckets and upload the objects here. Let me go to S3. Okay, and here it goes to S3. So this is how the S3 console looks like. Okay, for creating a bucket, what you have to do, just click on create bucket. Okay, and here you have to enter a name for the bucket which should be unique. So let me give the name as demo October 2021. I hope that this bucket should be available. And AWS region, what you have to select the region on the basis of the proximity to the users, the service and feature availability, and the pricing. So since this is just a demo, I am okay with the Mumbai region. You can also copy the settings from an existing bucket. I currently have no buckets in my account, no other buckets are there. Otherwise, if you want that two buckets should have same settings, you can just say copy settings from this particular bucket and all the settings will be matched. Here you can select the access. Okay, like by default it is private, it says below call public access, it is enabled. That means it will be all private by default. But if I disable this, that means it is now all public. It is not a controlled access, it is all public. Okay, so this is giving me a warning. Currently I say okay, I acknowledge that current settings might result in the bucket and the objects within becoming public. I am okay with that since this is just a demo bucket. Okay, here you select the bucket versioning settings. So about this I'll be telling you later in the session. Tags you can add with your bucket in order to keep the filtering good, management good. Encryption you can enable if you want. Okay, and then click on create bucket. Let's hope the bucket name is available. Yes, it is available and the bucket is now created. Now in order to add the object, I need to click on the name of the bucket. I need to click on upload. Okay, and here I need to click on add files and I will add just an image here. Okay, going to the downloads and I have an image which I will add here. So I am adding an object here. Here I can specify the permissions. Okay, if I want to keep it public or private, or I want to give a controlled access. So for now I'll give the public read access. Okay, I am okay with that. I understand the risk of granting public read access to the specified object. Then click on properties. So this is where you access, you change the storage class. Okay, if you want standard, by default this will be selected. If you want any other class, you can go ahead and select that class from here. And encryption you can set here, tags you can add. Okay, and then click on upload. Now the object has been uploaded since I kept this as a public. So here I go to the object, I will get a unique URL to access my object. Okay, so the URL looks like this. Here is the object URL. Okay, this is a public one. If I click on this one, yes, I am able to see the object. If I distribute this URL to anybody in the world from any device anywhere in the world, they will be able to access this object. Okay, so if you want to share the images or any kind of files with your friends, you can go ahead and host them in S3, and this is how they will be able to access the objects. Okay, so we have seen multiple things here: how to create a bucket, how to upload an object to that bucket, then how to select the storage class, what are the access patterns, how to make it public, then how do we select the region, and the bucket name should be unique. Okay, so another demo we will be seeing in a while. For now, let's move back to the slides and discuss another concept of S3, that is lifecycle policies. So let's see what are they. You can configure the life cycle policies of your objects in the to manage how they are stored throughout their life cycle. Okay, it's just a set of rules that can define actions that Amazon S3 applies to a group of objects. Okay, look at the keywords. Based on the age and the access patterns, it is moving the object from class to class. Okay, it automates the life cycle of the object. After an S3 lifecycle policy is set, your data will automatically transfer to a different storage class without any changes to your application. By using lifecycle policies, you can cycle the data at regular intervals among different S3 storage types. This cycling reduces your overall cost because you pay less for data as it becomes less important over time. So what does that mean? Let me give you an example. Let's say you are running an online course, okay, which has a batch of like you have got some batch of 20 students, okay, for the current month. Let's say for the October month you have got the batch of 20 students. So their data for the first 30 days you want to access frequently, right? Because that is the current batch. So you will keep them in the standard class. But you know that after the batch is over, next month in November, you won't require that data, right? Like you will require the data, but you will not be accessing it frequently, right? Because that month you will be having another batch. So for 30 days, you want to keep it in standard, but after 30 days, you will be accessing it infrequently. So you will want to keep it in the standard infrequent access class. And after 60 days, you know that that data will not be even required infrequently accessed, but it will be just required to be kept as a record or to be kept as a backup. So after 60 days, I want to move it to the Glacier. Okay, now after 1 year, I know that this data won't be useful also. I won't need that data. At that time, I will have another batches and this old batch data I won't need. So after 1 year, I want to delete it. Okay, so as to save the cost, because it is moving from class to class and it is getting deleted, I am saving cost by doing this. So why I am doing this? To automate this life cycle. When I have a guaranteed life cycle in my mind, I know surely that after these many days I will be accessing the data like that. After these many days I'll be accessing the data in that way. In that case, you can configure the lifecycle policies so that the life cycle of your objects will be automated and it will be transitioned from class to class automatically, and after the specified time it will be deleted automatically. You won't have to do anything manually here. Just set the lifecycle policies and you will be done. So now coming to the few use cases of S3, the most common use cases include backup and disaster recovery. Like you can keep some kind of snapshots or backups in Amazon S3, and in case of any disaster, you can restore the backups from Amazon S3, okay, to recover from the disaster. Then staging area for big data. Suppose you have big data that you are collecting from various sources, you can keep that in a S3 bucket, which you can name it as raw data, and you can fetch that data. Okay, that data can be fetched by an application which is performing the computation on that data. Okay, then after filtering that data, after processing that data, it can be stored into a new bucket. Okay, just to keep the raw data and the new data, you can use S3 buckets. Then static website hosting. This is a most common use case that you can hear about Amazon S3. If you have a website for which the data is not constantly changing, it is just a static website, you can host that very easily on Amazon S3. I'll show you how you do that on S3. Okay, Then media hosting, like we did just now, we can host any kind of media in S3 and we can share the URL so that other people can access that data. It will be hosted on Amazon S3. Then software delivery. Okay, you can host your software applications that the customers can download, and there can be many more cases. These were just few cases about S3 that I told you. There can be many more cases apart from this as well. So now we will see how do we host a static website on S3. So I'll go back to the AWS console and go back to S3. We will create a new bucket which we will be using to host the static website. So click on create bucket. Let's say I name it as my website 10982. Just some random number I'm giving so that to make sure it is available. So region, I'll keep it at this, and because I'm using it for hosting static website, that means I want to keep it public. So I'll keep it public, and versioning for now I won't be enabling because I'm yet to tell you about versioning. Then encryption, no, I do not want, and click on create bucket. Yes, the bucket name was available and now my bucket has been created. Now we will upload some files into this. So I have a template. Okay, I downloaded a template to be used as my website. So I'll upload that data itself. Okay, I'll first add some folders. I have this. Okay, yeah, I'll be adding all these folders. So let me add them one by one. So I have added all the folders and the files that I had for my template. As you can see, it's already 76 files that I have here. Okay, the same process you have to follow. Just click on add files for a file, and for folder you just need to click on add folder. And here I'll keep it as public. Okay, I will grant public read access since this bucket I'm using to host the static website. Now everything will be uploaded. Let's wait for this to be uploaded successfully. So here we see all the objects have been uploaded. Now what I will do, I'll go back to my bucket. Okay, the other bucket that was there, my website. All the objects are there. I think, yes, we have all the objects, and go to properties. Okay, going to properties. Now what I have to do, I have to enable a feature known as static website hosting. You can see it is currently disabled. So I'll click on edit and click on enable. So you want to host it as a static website? Yes, we can also redirect the requests that are coming to some other bucket to this bucket. So here we are not doing this, we are hosting it as a static website. For index document, what do we want? Index.html. This is the name of my index.html. This is a page which will be shown when I first navigate to my website. If there's any error document, that also I can specify here, but here I am just leaving it. Then click on save changes. Now my bucket is like configured to host the static website. What we will get, if I scroll down, I'll get the URL to access my website. I just need to go to this URL, and this is a URL for my website. So here what you do, just click on this URL and done. This is the website that is hosted on S3. Okay, the complete website is here. You can check out all the pages that are there. Okay, like I go to contact, everything is available here, and you can notice the URL also. So I'm going to home. This is the index document. Okay, so this was just one website, just a demo website that I hosted on S3. A good idea can be to host your portfolio website on S3, because that if you present it like to an employer, that will show your skills of AWS cloud. You know about AWS cloud, you are quite familiar, and also a unique way to present your portfolio website and your resume. You can host these kind of things on S3, which will be a smart step, I would say. Okay, which will make you stand out amongst the crowd. So this is how you do it. Just follow these simple steps. I created a bucket, I uploaded the objects into that, I enabled the static website hosting property. That's it. It was done. Now my website is ready. Just within 5 minutes the website is ready. Now the other feature that I was about to tell you, if we go to management, this is where we set the life cycle policies. You just need to click on create life cycle rule and you can set the life cycle policies, how you want to transition the object from one class to another based on their age. Okay, so let's go ahead and discuss about the next feature that we have with S3. This is versioning. So versioning in Amazon S3 is a means of keeping multiple variants of an object with the same name in the same S3 bucket. With versioning, you can recover more easily from both unintended user actions and application failures. After versioning is enabled for a bucket, if S3 receives multiple write requests for the same object simultaneously, it stores all of those objects. It can help you recover objects from the accidental deletion or overwrites because it adds a delete marker. For example, if you delete an object in a bucket on which versioning is enabled, S3 inserts a delete marker instead of removing the object permanently. The delete marker becomes the current object version. If you overwrite an object, it results in a new object version in the bucket. You can always restore the previous version. This feature is disabled by default. As you would have noticed, when we were creating the bucket, versioning was disabled, and once enabled, the existing objects won't change. That means if you add if you expect that the current objects that you had before versioning was enabled, they will have some different versions. No, nothing will happen to them. But after enabling versioning, whatever you add, it will be counted as the it will be counted into versioning. So you can see in this image also all the three objects, namely robot.png, penguin.png and dog.png, they are stored in a bucket named photo bucket, and all of them have different versions because this bucket is a version one. Each version of the object is assigned a version ID. For example, each version of robot.png has its own version ID, like robot.png version 1, robot.png version 2 and robot.png version 3. So some unique version ID will be there. Name will be same, but how it will be differentiated in S3 with the version ID that they get. Okay, it will be unique number that each version will be getting. So now let's see that in the AWS console. How do we work with the S3 versioning? So we will go to the S3 and we will use the previous bucket that we create demo October 2021. So on this bucket itself, we will enable the versioning. Go to properties and we will enable the versioning of it. Okay, so click on bucket versioning edit and enable the versioning. Okay, and then save changes. Now my bucket is a version bucket. Okay, whatever I upload into this bucket, it will be counted as version. So I will be clicking on show versions. It will show all the versions of the object that are available. So what I will do, I will upload a file into this S3 bucket. I have enabled the versioning. So I go back to the documents and I have a sample file. I will show you what it contains. Okay, let me just upload. I will grant public read access. I understand and click on upload. So this is what is included in the sample file. Okay, version 1. This includes this data. So if I access this object, let me just close this. So from the URL of this object, that is samplefile.txt, let me see what it says. This is saying version 1. So let me get back to the bucket again. I will upload, first let me change the data here. I will say version 2 and saving now and click on upload, add files, again samplefile.txt. I will upload, same permissions, granting the public read access and click on upload. Okay, now let's go back to the bucket. Now can you see here, first let me show this. So if I upload, if I update, you can see this has now become version 2 because I just uploaded a file which now contains version 2. This also has a sample file name. Okay, earlier file also had the sample file. Now this file has become the current version of this name. Samplefile.txt's current version is this, which contains version 2, data as version 2. So if I click on show versions, you can see the previous version is also there. If I click there and I access this object, I'll be able to see that data. Okay, let me go back here, and it is opening. So here I can see all the versions. Yes, it's here. So if I access this object, what it contains? Version 1. The file is name. File name is same. But what is unique in the URL? Can you see this? The entire URL is same, but this is something different. Now it is having a version ID. That means this is a previous version. This is a previous version that was there. The current version is this one. Current version's URL won't contain the version ID. Okay, this is a previous version. That's why it is having a version ID in the URL. Now let me show you one thing. Let me hide this. Okay, so if I try to delete this object, what I will do, I click on delete. It is saying it won't permanently delete the object, but a delete marker will be added. That means this object will be marked as the delete marker. It will still say in S3. It won't be deleted, but it will be marked as the delete marker. So if I type delete here and I confirm that I want to delete the object. Okay, now I go to the bucket. What I see here, I will not be able to see the object in the list. Okay, you can see only docs.jpg is here, no sample file.txt, it's not there. Now if I click on show versions, see the delete marker is there. That means the sample file.txt is marked as delete marker. Okay, it has not permanently deleted the object. Now what if I want to restore this file? What I will do, just click on this delete and permanently delete. Okay, what I am doing, I am just deleting the delete marker to restore the object, and this can't be undone because this is permanently deleting the delete marker. Okay, now go back to the bucket again and see here in the list the object has come back. Okay, now if I again click on show versions, you can see both the versions are there, and the file, the current one is there. The current one is version 2 and the previous one version 1. Okay, so this is how we work with the versioning. You can keep multiple versions of the same file in the same bucket. So this was about versioning. Now let's go back to the next topic that we have, moving data to S3. I'll just give you a brief overview of different options that we have for faster movement of data to S3. So first is multi-part upload. It allows you to upload a single object as a set of parts. What it does, each part is a contiguous portion of the object's data. You can upload these objects parts independently and in any order. If transmission of any part fails, you can retransmit that part without affecting other parts. Let's say you have a 10 GB of object. What it will do, if you enable multi-part upload, it will break your object into multiple parts, and those parts will be uploaded independently. Okay, it is not uploading as a single object. It is breaking into parts and uploading the object then, but the final output will be a single object itself. Okay, so it will make sure the data upload has become faster because now it is uploading individual smaller objects. Next is the transfer acceleration. It's a bucket level feature that enables fast, easy and secure transfer of files over long distances between your client and an S3 bucket. It takes advantage of the edge locations, okay, in CloudFront. As the data arrives at an edge location, the data will be routed to S3 over an optimized path. This is a diagram that is depicting the transfer acceleration itself. You can see the user has used the transfer acceleration feature. So first the data from his location will go to the nearest edge location. From that edge location to S3, wherever it is in the world, it will go over an optimized path over the private network. Okay, and this is how the direct upload will look like. It is not using edge locations. It will go over the normal internet itself. Next, we can also use snow devices, which contains snow cone, snowball and snowmobile, which offers a number of physical devices and capacity points, most with built-in computing capabilities also. These services help physically transport up to exabytes of data into and out of AWS at a very fast speed. Okay, so these are the options that you can use for faster upload, and I hope you have got a good understanding of all the S3 basics and the features that we have discussed today. So we will meet in the next video. Thank you everyone.